Hello everyone. Today I want to tell you about James Douglas, also known as Good Sir James or Black Douglas. He was born at about 1286 and died at 24th of August 1330. He was a Scottish knight and a feudal lord. He was one of the chief commanders during the War of Scottish Independence. He was the elder son of Sir William Douglas, known as Le Hardy or the Bold, who has been first noble supporter of William Wallace. The elder Douglas died in about 1298 as a prisoner in the Tower of London. His mother was Elizabeth Stuart, the daughter of Alexander Stuart, the first High Steward of Scotland, who died in about 1287 or early 1288. His father remarried in late 1288, so Douglas's birth had been prior to that. However, the destruction of a record in Scotland makes an exact date or even year impossible to pinpoint. Douglas was sent to France for safety in the early days of War of Independence and was educated in Paris. There he met William Lamberton, Bishop of St. Andrews, who took him as a squire. He returned to Scotland with Lamberton. His land has been seized and awarded to Robert Clifford. Lamberton presented him at the occupying English court the petition for the return of his land shortly after the capture of Stirling Castle in 1304. But when Edward I of England heard whose son he was, he grew angry and Douglas was forced to depart. Of course, this forced him to join Robert Bruce, to whom he became a loyal friend and comrade at arms for his War of Independence. This was a particularly dramatic moment in the Scottish history. Robert Bruce, Earl of Carrick, had played a role in slaying of John Comyn, a leading Scottish rival, on the 6th February of 1306 at Cayfares Kirk in Dumfries. Bruce, having wounded Comyn with his dagger, rushed from the church and encountered his attendants outside. Bruce told them what he did and said, "I must be off, for I doubt I have slain the Red Comyn." "Doubt?" Sir Roger the Kirkpatrick of Cosburn answered. "I'm Seeker. I will take sure, or I'll make sure," and rushing into the church, finishing Comyn. Bruce immediately claimed the crown of Scotland in defiance of the English king. Less than 7 weeks after the killing in Dumfries, Bruce was crowned king on March 25th. It was while he was on his way to Glasgow to meet the Bishop Wishart and went to Scone, the traditional site of Scottish coronations, that he was met by Douglas riding on a horse borrowed from Bishop Lamberton. Douglas explained his circumstances and immediately offered his service. Future good Sir Douglas was not very strong or very healthy. It was a sickly young man with bright imagination and courteous manners. He lisped, and as many Douglases was swart and with dark hairs. But it was rather treacherous appearance. He was absolutely fearless and very quick. He was managed to put fear into the hearts of English and courage into the hearts of his comrades. Douglas was said to share in Bruce's early misfortunes, being present at the defeats at Methven and Battle of Dalry. But for both men, these setbacks were a valuable lesson in tactics. Limitations in both resources and equipment meant that the Scots would always be at a disadvantage in conventional medieval warfare. By the time the war was renewed in the spring of 1307, they had learned the value of guerrilla warfare, known at the time as secret war, using fast-moving, lightly equipped and agile forces to maximum effect against the enemy, often locked into static defensive position. Douglas's actions for most of 1307 and early 1308, although confined to the most part of his native Douglasdale, were essential for keeping enemy in the south and freeing Bruce to campaign in the north. He soon created a formidable reputation for himself as a soldier and a tactician. While Bruce was campaigning in the north against his domestic enemies, Douglas used the cover of Selkirk Forest to mount highly effective mobile attacks against the enemy. He also showed himself to be utterly ruthless, particularly in his relentless attacks on the English garrison in his own Douglas Castle, the most famous which quickly passed into popular history. Barbour dates this incident to Palm Sunday 1307, which fell on March 19. Some question whether this date is too early, as Bruce and his small army were not yet established in the southwest Scotland, suggesting Palm Sunday 1308, 17th of April, as a more accurate date. With the help of a local farmer, Thomas Dixon, a former vassal of his father, Douglas and his small troop were hidden until the morning of Palm Sunday, when the garrison left the battlements to attend the local church. Gathering local support, he entered the church, and the war cry "Douglas, Douglas" went up for the first time. Some of the English soldiers were killed, and the other taken prisoner. The prisoners were taken to the castle, now largely empty. All the stores were piled together in the cellar, the wine cask burst open, and the wood used to fuel. The prisoners were then beheaded and placed on the top of a pile, which was set alight. Before departing, the wells were poisoned with the salt and the carcasses of the dead horses. The local people soon gave the whole gruesome episode the name of the Douglas Slaughter. As an example of fruitfulness in war, it was meant to leave a lasting impression, not least upon the men who came to replace their dead colleagues. In August 1308, Douglas met the king for a joint attack on the MacDouglas of Lorne, kinsmen of Comyns, the climax of Bruce's campaign in the north. 2 years before, the MacDougals had intercepted and mauled the royal army at the Battle of Dalry. Now they awaited the arrival of their opponents in the narrow pass of Branda between Ben Cruachan and Loch Eave in Angleshire. While Bruce pinned down the enemy in frontal advance through the pass, Douglas, completely unobserved, led a party of loyal Highlanders farther up to the mountains, launching a surprise attack from the rear. Soon the Battle of Pass of Brandes turned into the road. Returning south soon after, Douglas joined the Edward Bruce, the king's brother, in a successful assault on the Rutherglen Castle near Glasgow, going on to the further campaign Galloway. In the Battle of Bannockburn, Douglas commanded the small flank of Scottish army, for which he was awarded for a large land. It was one of the key battles in Scottish War of Independence, where Scottish troops defeated English army of Edward II on the June 23-24, 1314, 3 miles away from a small river of Bannockburn. I will make more thorough video about this battle later. In English chronicles you won't find good Sir Douglas, but in English tale you will find the Black Douglas, a sinister and murderous force. Myrfelden is the devil in hell. They say the knight could siege any castle with his retinue of Highlanders, crying "Douglas, Douglas, you all dead," or attack fortified camps. At Samba 1319 he almost captured Queen Elizabeth, wife of Edward II, in her castle, with all the treasury and judges. Later in autumn of the same year he defeated the army of Archbishop of York in Meaton-on-Swale battle, or just Meaton, and 8 years later he almost captured young Edward II, who was sleeping in his stalls near Weardale.
The not quite so brave as Sir Lancelot, who had nearly fought the Dragon of Angnor, who had nearly stood up to the vicious Chicken of Bristol, and who had personally wet himself at the Battle of Baden Hill.
Sorry guys, couldn't resist. Legends were told about his courage and cunning. To take impregnable strategic castle Roxburgh in 1314, he dressed his men in a cloak of furs imitating the head of cattle. There was no other choice to get to the castle unnoticed. Famous writer Walter Scott described this episode in his History of Scotland like this. A wife of one of the officers noticed moving black spots on the field, but a watchman assured her that shepherds brought the herd. That calmed the woman down, and she went to lulling her baby with the song hush, you little bet you, the Black Douglas shall not get you. Suddenly Armored Glove touched her shoulder, and the voice said, I wouldn't be so sure. They say though he got rid of the garrison, but sent the woman with the baby back to English unharmed. Though it is known now that he was not that kind all the time. For example, he released captured longbowmen only after cutting their thumb or poking out one of their eyes, so they couldn't use a bow anymore. Slaying the John Comyn was always a hard burden to Bruce's soul. On his deathbed, he wanted to amend his crime of murder and blasphemy, and asked Douglas to take his heart to Holy Land, as he was not able to attend crusades due to war in Scotland. When Bruce died, Douglas put his embalmed heart into the chest and departed to Palestine. But when he reached Spanish port, he answered the call of Castilian king and joined a crusade against Moors. In Granada, Douglas was severely wounded, and he ripped the chest from his neck and threw into the battle with the cry, "You go first, as you should have been. Douglas will follow and die." Saved and returned heart was returned to Scotland and buried in Melrose Abbey, and Douglas's successors at the heart of the coat of arms. This shield you can have noticed in my video about Battle of Poitiers, where it was used by William Douglas, the first Earl of Douglas, who fought, not surprisingly, for French. Well, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Like it if you do, subscribe if you don't want to miss more. Bye bye.